All right. I am delighted that we now have a small group of congregants had approached us about creating an Israel interest group. I'm now blanking on what it is actually called, but I know that David will tell us when he introduces our speaker. Several people who wanted us to really engage with conversations about Israel and with people who are involved in work in Israel so that we can strengthen our relationship with our Jewish homeland. And I'm going to turn things over to David Hyman to say just a word about that group and to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Rabbi, and Shabbat Shalom, everyone. A word about our new committee, Israel Connections. It's, in addition to me, it's Ben and Orly and David Baker. David will actually be managing the Q&A tonight. And we have gotten together in hopes of doing continued programming around issues of Israel interest to our congregation, believing that it's core to our Jewish identity. Tonight's our debut, of course, about which we are very excited. And in October, we're planning our next program with a representative from the New Israel Fund and the social justice work they are doing. But now on to my introduction of our speaker. After returning from a mission to Ethiopian Jewry in 1988, one of the most repeated and annoying questions I received was, are they really Jewish? And my response consistently was, after spending a week in Gondar, Ethiopia, I came back thinking, am I really Jewish? Given the level of commitment and dedication to Judaism and our people, as we all know, the exodus of Ethiopian Jews to Israel is not only one of the more remarkable miracles of Jewish history, but really of world history. So our speaker is Deputy Consul General at the Miami Consulate, and she arrived in Israel when she was 10 years old in 1991, which tells me that when I was visiting Israel, we didn't spend a lot of time hanging out together. I'm sorry, when I was in Ethiopia, she was just a toddler. But she has spent her time working in various embassies in New Zealand, in Myanmar. She holds an MA degree from Tel Aviv University and a BA from Hebrew University. And we've asked her tonight to talk about her family's experience in coming from Ethiopia to Israel, and about the state of the Ethiopian community in Israel. She has spent significant time in the States before Miami. She even has a slight connection to Elkins Park, which she might tell us about. And before I ask her to speak, I just want the committee to know that I did have one secret with our speaker tonight that I didn't let anyone know. When we first met, she agreed that right before she would speak to Kol Ami, she would arrange for a breakthrough for an agreement with one of the Arab countries that she could talk about with just Kol Ami. So we're very appreciative. And with that, I welcome and introduce you to Deputy Consul General Kasa Bainesay-Harbor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you very much, Rabbi Leah Berkovich, and thank you, David Baker, and thank you, everyone, for welcoming me. I'm really happy to see you all. I look forward to share and to have this dialogue and conversation about Israel and what's happening now. Of course, just yesterday was a huge breakthrough in the Middle East. The Middle East won't be the same again. But we can talk about it later, which is really a fascinating development in our region and blissful, and we are so happy about it. Israel always, not only Israel, our value as Jewish people is always to pray for shalom. In the prayer right now, the word shalom came up so many times. So this is our core value as Jewish people, to pray for shalom, to pray for peace. So I'm glad that's, right now we live in an amazing time where an Arab country not only recognizing Israel, but also normalizing and willing to make peace with Israel. What we always want, and this is what we always pursue. Yeah, so it's great to be with you here. So a little bit about myself, my background, but before, let me see. Like I was born in Ethiopia.
Are you trying to share something?
Yeah, I wanted to share
Okay,
a
one second, I can get you set up for that.
Thank you. I was born in David, I'm sure you can tell your experience in Gondar, north of Ethiopia, what you saw there, the villages that you saw. There are villages, with no running water, no electricity. I'm sure you heard of all this kind of stories, how we grew up, how I grew up, how the Ethiopian Jews, also we known as a falasha, just the name itself, falasha, means in Amharic, and also in Hebrew, polesh. As you know, Amharic, it's a Semitic language. Polesh means invader, someone who doesn't belong to the place. So our neighbors called us falasha. We called ourselves Beta Israel. Beta Israel, it's Bait, Beta, home, Israel. We are part of Israel. Mind you, we used to be 12 tribes, and Judah was one of them. And because Judah, the tribe of Judah, was the last one to stay in the land of Israel, I'm just making a long story short. That's why we called Judah Jewish. That's why all of us called Jewish. But mind you, we were 12 tribes. And we, one of the tribe of Dan. Now, some of us left Israel before the destruction of the first temple, okay? We traveled south, some of us to Yemen, some of us to Egypt, and somehow we end up in Ethiopia. So for us, the destruction of the first temple we found it as a surprise. And some of us, when we arrived to Israel, we were looking to find out, as we left it, to find the temple. But it was a big surprise for us, there was no temple. So we were isolated from anyone just to keep our identity. We kept ourselves isolated as a community. We helped each other as a community, taking care of each other. And one of the things, David, I'm sure you saw it in Ethiopia when you saw the Ethiopian Jews in the 80s, is the meaning of Shabbat. Shabbat was everything, okay? Because this is from the Bereshit, from Genesis. When God created the world, Shabbat was the first mitzvah to keep Shabbat, okay? Beside, after Anochi Adonai Elohechem, the first mitzvah is to keep Shabbat. So for us, the Ethiopian Jews, Shabbat was the holiest thing to keep. So what does that mean? Which means, it says, "V'shamru bnei Israel et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat ledorotam brit olam." Ledorotam, generation after generation, we kept Shabbat. So for us, there is no such a thing secular. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I grew up in a village. I will show you. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so I don't know if you see the screen. So first of all, I want to show you a picture, okay? This picture, okay, it's, this picture, you can see Ben Gurion, okay? And this is Chanukiah. We call it in Hebrew Chanukiah, but this is the menorah when you light the candles on Hanukkah. This is in Burma, Myanmar, now, what used to be Burma. So Ben Gurion in the early 60s, he went to Burma because we had relations with Burma and the local Jewish community and leaders, and he lit Hanukkah candles in the 60s. So why is that relevant to my story? Keep in mind this picture and I will tell you, okay? Now this is our Qasim, our rabbis praying in the kotel. And this is for us, it's just a miracle. It's just the fact that I'm talking with you. If you ask me more than 30 years ago, I would be like, I would think that you are a Michigan, like what kind of craziness it is. But just the fact that our rabbis, the Qasim, are praying in the kotel, in the kotel in Jerusalem, like he used to be with drums and everything, that's a miracle itself. So this is, imagine if this is my kind of village. David, I'm sure this is the kind of things that you saw there. So we were farmers, you know, my mom used to make crochet. Do you know the game Mancala? So my first visit in America, I saw the Mancala game in Walmart. And I was so surprised, like, how did they get to have our games from Ethiopia to Walmart to America? That was a big surprise for us. So imagine that this is the village, okay? And this is the synagogue, okay? And this small house. Beside the Shabbat, you know what we the Ethiopian Jew, we kept so many things that that was forgotten, but this is the practice that used to be when the temple used to exist, okay? So I gave you one example, which is Shabbat, how we kept our tradition as people of Israel, okay? And the second example is this house. You see the woman that isolated and sitting by herself in a small hut? We call it Mergam Gojo. Woman once a month, okay, in her monthly time, she used to go there. Why? Because in the temple time, when you go to the temple to pray or to sacrifice, you know, at least 3 times a year, when woman is in her monthly time, she was not allowed to go into the temple. I don't know if you read the book, The Red Tent by Anita Diamond. For some of you who read the book, it's similar like this, okay? So the woman, she was, you know, kind of isolated because she wasn't pure. After 7 days, she will be cleaned in the running water, or waterfall, or river, and then the rabbi or the guest will bless her, and then she goes back home. So what does that mean? For 7 days, she doesn't have to do anything. The community taking care of everything. Gemilut Hasidim, Tzedakah, it was the community that is taking care of each other. And this is the secret of the Jewish people around the world, how we kept each other together for thousands of years. When other people kind of disappear and the language and the ancient tradition disappeared, how we managed to survive until today, and we're keeping kind of doing the same thing. How me in Ethiopia did the same thing that you kind of did in wherever you are, in Europe or wherever you are, okay? Because the community, we took care of each other. So when the woman was in this house for 7 days, the community took care of everything, which means taking care of the kids, the family, cooking, bringing water from the well, okay? Because there was no running water. So this is a water can made of clay that my mother used to make. And that's how we used to bring water from the well. And basically, that was the life in Ethiopia. In Shabbat, everything rested. The cows, the horses, everything, we do nothing, okay? I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, I broke the water can on Shabbat, and I was really afraid to be, punished. So I secretly ran to the water well to bring water, and then my uncle saw me, and I was really punished for, not because I broke the water can, and not because there was no water to drink. It's because I dare to break Shabbat and bringing water from the well. That's how we kept our tradition. Now, this is the books. Our Orit Torah. Orit means from the Aramaic word, the Oraita. That's how we kept. So we didn't have the Torah, the core Torah that you know of as today. Our Torah was like a book, and it was written by ancient language, Ge'ez. And that's how we practice. And basically, if you know some Aramaic, you know the Ge'ez. So our language was, the praying language was in Ge'ez, which is an ancient Semitic language. So the Gondar area, just to show you a little bit. Bahardar Gondar is right here, if you see it. And we kind of lived around here, one of those villages. So we lived in isolated villages, like I said, just to keep as a community, to keep our tradition. So we want to, mix. So our tradition, making clothes and blessing, like Yitzhak was blessing Jacob, that's how they used to bless, and that's how we used to bless each other in the Orit. And what as feeling today, for us, it was just to scroll some quotes from the Torah, from the Orit, and to wear it as a necklace or as a bracelet, just to remember. The first connection, was more than 100 years ago with Yaakov Feitlovich. He was an anthropologist in Europe, in France, and he heard of, by Christian missionaries. He heard there are some group of people that the neighbors, they call them Falasha, but they call themselves Beta Israel, but they have kind of the tradition of Jewish people that they do in Europe. And he came to research. I'll give you, I'll give you a small anecdote. When I served in New Zealand, you have to meet someone called Tzahai. Tzahai is an Ethiopian name, which means sun, okay? And she was, beautiful, blonde girl. She has nothing to do with Ethiopians. And I asked her, why your name is Tzahai? Apparently her mother, New Zealander Jew, she went to England to do her PhD in anthropology. So she wanted to research the lost tribe. And she heard about the lost tribe in India. Her professor told her, India is taken, go to Ethiopia. And she was surprised. There are, tribes, lost tribe in Ethiopia. And to make a long story short, when I, when I was a diplomat in New Zealand and I met her, and she told me the whole story, how she visited our communities in the 70s. And the reason she called her daughter Tzahai is because the princess, Haile Selassie's daughter, she was the princess, she was really beautiful, and she said if she will have a daughter, she will call her Tzahai. And later on, many years later, I get to meet her in New Zealand as a diplomat of the State of Israel. What an amazing connection. The aliyahs, of, I won't do this movie, but Israel. I'm making a long story short, but for us, when we heard there is the way to Israel, we did not think twice, okay? We immediately took just food and just small clothes, and we started the journey from, I'll show you the map. We started the journey from Ethiopia. When I said started the journey, is walking without shoes, okay? When we started through Sudan, from, this is Sudan. And of course, a lot of you heard the secret mission, the Operation Moses, and Moses Operation, and other operation. And you, some of you who watched the movie, The Red Sea Diving Resort from Netflix. If you watch this, just to do thumbs up if you watch the movie. If you haven't watched it, so I recommend you to watch The Red Sea Diving Resort. It's an amazing movie that shows how the Israeli Secret Service, the Mossad, basically helped us to come to Israel and through a secret mission in Sudan, which was an enemy country. So that's how we did our journey. Now, in Israel, when we came to Israel, one of the other traditions that we kept was the Sigd. The Sigd, once it was in the Bible. It is in the Bible. So once a year, beside Yom Kippur, you gather the people and you pray to God. Okay. So after Yom Kippur, the Ethiopian Jews, it doesn't matter where we were in Ethiopia, we gather in one place that called Ambover. When I say it doesn't matter where we're in Ethiopia, just imagine you coming from the villages all over area, okay, walking for days to pray together once a year with all the Ethiopian Jewish community, with all the Beta Israel community, okay? So if Ambover was here, for example, all the Ethiopian Jews that were here and here from all over the country would come to one place together. It was amazing itself, just to gather in one place once a year from all over. There were no cars, so just whatever you have, you walk or you are riding your horse or your donkey, and then you come together. So that moment of gathering together was not only to pray to God to come back to Jerusalem, but also was a moment of gathering and encouraging and empowering each other to keep the tradition, because one day God will answer our prayer and we'll go back to Jerusalem. And this is exactly what happened. And I'm just so lucky to be in this time that I get the chance to come back, to go back to Jerusalem. And that was the moment, that day, the Sigd itself, where everyone got together, got empowered, and had this inspiration to keep praying and to keep the tradition. And finally, we are in Jerusalem, and praying. And this is my community doing the Sigd in Jerusalem. This is a miracle itself, and that's the secret of our people, the faith. That we kept each other together, we prayed, and God answered our prayers. Now, remember the picture I showed you at the beginning of Ben Gurion lighting Hanukkah candles in Burma in the 60s? So that's me and my husband, Philip. Many years later, after I made Aliyah and I became a diplomat, I decided to do Hanukkah reception for the local diplomats, fellows, and the local young leadership. And this is we lighting Hanukkah candles with the same menorah, the same Chanukiah that Ben Gurion lit the Hanukkah candles. Okay, this is amazing itself. And this is the same menorah, the same Chanukiah. My husband happened to be American and I'm Ethiopian. We met, we got married, and we moved to Burma. And this is all because of our faith and because our prayer and because we kept our tradition. And thank God, God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Leah, Rachel answered our prayer, and here I am telling you the story about it. So that's my small story, short story. Just, when I came in Israel at the age of 10, that was the first time that I went to school, basically learned to read and write. But also I did the path of every Israeli, finishing high school, serving in the army. And then my Elkin Spark connection, here it comes, is after my army service, my friend suggested me to go to summer camps in America to teach Hebrew. So I said, I know nothing about American Jews. I knew nothing about it. And I said, you know what, it would be a great adventure, so I'll go. So I went to Camp Ramah in the Poconos, and I was a Hebrew teacher there. It was a life-changing experience for me. And the great community in Elkins Park welcomed me so nicely. It was really a life-changing experience because I knew nothing about, a conservative reform or other communities outside of my community and the religious, Orthodox community in Israel. So it was an eye-opening. It was a learning moment for me. It's changed my life forever. So thank you guys for being there in Elkins Park and giving me the opportunity to experience other ways to celebrate Judaism. And yeah, so after that I went to, I almost for 10 years I went back to camp. If I couldn't go to camp in the Ramah Poconos, then I was a madricha counselor in Israel when the Bogrim, when they finished, they come to Israel for the summer. So that was an amazing experience itself. Yes, so this is my short story. Now, if you want to talk about Israel and what the current situation, I would love to do that. But if you have questions, please.
Thank you so much, Kasa. That was wonderful. I love seeing the pictures and hearing the story. Um, we've been starting to get some questions, and we got some questions beforehand. And I'll start with a question from our rabbi, because I think it's a very interesting and important question. But can you talk about your experience being a Jew of color in the United States, since you've been here as deputy counsel, and comparing that to how it may be similar or different being a Jew of color while you were living in Israel?
The first thing that I've learned here is that the phrase itself, Jew of color, because it doesn't exist in Israel, just the term itself, Jew of color. We are Jewish. You're Jewish or not Jewish. That's it. You don't call yourself Jew of color. We don't call ourselves Jew of color. We are Ethiopian Jew, or Ethiopian descent Jews. The term itself is here in America. So if you ask an Israeli Jew of color, I was like, what is that? Okay. So my experience here, the Jewish community is amazing. One of the reasons that I wanted to be diplomat is because I met the Jewish community in Elkins Park more than 20 years ago. Okay, it's an amazing community, great values, and really, even the campers that I met at camp, they were really amazing in the education. I think that you do, it's really fascinating. Now, being here, for me, when I go to events or official things, the first thing that they see is just a Black woman, okay? So no one assumed that I am an Israeli diplomat or an Israeli at all. Let's put it this way. So until I open my mouth and I speak, then they say, oh, you are Jewish? You are Israeli? There are Black people in Israel? You're diplomat for the state of Israel? A big surprise. So what I'm trying to say, there is a lot of ignorance out there, okay? And our job is to educate. Educate what's Israel, how Israel looks like. Israel is one of the diverse countries in the world. And I'll give you an example. I live in Ramle. In Ramle, it's a small city in the suburb of Tel Aviv. In Ramle, you have Jews. I'll go back to the Jewish community. You have Christian Arabs, you have Muslims Arabs, and you have the Karaim, I don't know if you've heard of, and many others, okay? The Jewish community in the Israelis, the Jewish Israelis, they are so diverse in Ramle. Ramle is just a small example, okay? There are so many synagogues there. There are the Yemeni Jews, the Ethiopian Jews, the Bukhara Jews, the Moroccan Jews, the Tunisian Jews, and I'm sure I'm missing something. There are more than 10 groups or 20 groups, and each group has its own synagogue. But one thing is in common for the Jewish people around the world is the Torah, is the tradition, and the holidays. So on Yom Kippur, which is the high holiday for every Jew in every corner of the world, on Yom Kippur, it's very interesting to see what's happening in Ramle. Everyone goes to your own synagogue. Even me, I go to my Ethiopian synagogue. But what my favorite things to do was to take my little sister and to do synagogue hop. I really recommend you, if you go to Israel on high holidays, especially on Yom Kippur, to be in Ramle and to visit. It's because everything is in a walking distance. Really, you don't need to drive. you know that you don't need to drive like in Tel Aviv. In Ramle, it's a small city. You can walk from one place to another in 5-10 minutes. So to visit the synagogue and Yom Kippur, from Ethiopian synagogue to Moroccan synagogue, to Yemeni synagogue, to Tunisian synagogue, to the Bukhara synagogue, to Uzbekistan Jewish synagogue, to Azerbaijan Jewish synagogue, there are so many of them, just to go and to see how they pray on Yom Kippur. And this is what I really loved to do when I was in Ramle. It's fascinating itself. So it shows you not only, it shows you the diversity of Israel, okay, and also the Indian Jews, not to mention, of course, okay. So this is to go back to when people talk about Israel, they talk only what they see on the news, and some of them also the young Jewish people that unfortunately are not, they don't know much about Israel. They talk about Israel. So education is so important because obviously prejudice and hate things coming from ignorance. And education is so important, especially when it comes to Israel. And I appreciate the programming that you do, David, him and David Baker, because if we as Jewish people, okay, if we don't know enough about our heritage and our ancestor, our history, and what Israel is for us as a Jewish people, as part of our Jewish identity, then no one can teach us. Not only that no one can teach us, but also if a Jew doesn't know his history, its history and identity and Israel and values, then how we can explain about himself to other people who don't know what Jewish is or what Israel is. So that's why I repeat again, first we educate ourselves more and our children and our grandchildren, so they can go and educate other or non-Jews or no one that people that know nothing about Jewish people or Israel, so they can learn what Jewish looks like, what Jewish looks like. But although Jewish people are white from Europe, no, you have me and my community as well. So it's again, it's very, very important to educate and I do believe, and we know that as a Jewish people, because first of all, you educate yourself at home and your kids, and you are responsible for your own education of your kids. In the Bible, it says, "Chosech shivto soneh bno," which means if you don't educate your kids, which means you hate your kids. Okay, that's the, and I'm sure all of us love our kids and we want to educate our kids. So that's the.
Thank you. So here's another question. How do you feel the young Ethiopian generation, which I guess has grown up in Israel and did not make the exodus from Ethiopia, how do you feel the young Ethiopian generation is integrating into all of Israel's society?
That's a very good question. As a young person that I came to Israel, and I'm openly speaking with you honestly about it, because we were so different, you know, our parents, they don't know even to read and write, not in Hebrew, and you know, they don't know the culture. Came to a totally new country, which means when the children learn the language so quickly, then the parents became dependent on the kids. Okay, so when as a parent you are dependent on your kids, so how can you be a leader for them? So how can you educate them? That became a huge crisis. Okay, so there was an element of being ashamed of the culture and the tradition that the parents came with them. The young people felt ashamed because they want to be totally Israelis. Some of them wouldn't even speak Amharic, is the language of Ethiopia. But recently now, there are a lot of young people that say, we are proud where we come from. We are proud of our tradition. We are proud that our ancestors and grandparents and parents, they kept this amazing tradition for thousands of years. And there is elements of return to the culture and to be proud of the parents. So when we talk about integration, so instead of, there are two ways of integration. One, being ashamed of your parents and you don't want to do anything with your parent tradition. We want to be totally Israeli. That didn't really much help for a lot of young people because there was a crisis of identity. But the second wave is to be integrated from a place of pride. I am a proud Ethiopian Jew. I'm proud of my tradition and my parents and my grandparents' tradition. Therefore, I have a lot to teach the Israelis. Okay, so now you will see a lot of young people going to education. Prejudice is there, okay? Everywhere in the world there is prejudice, okay? But the society in Israel, you know, when you want to talk about racism, it's not the same like what's happening here in America. Because we know as a Jewish people that we were separated for thousands of years, okay? And because we were separated for thousands of years, each of us thinks that he holds the truth, okay? I think that I was holding the truth in Ethiopia, okay? So when we came to Israel and we found out there are secular people and people that don't keep Shabbat, for us was a huge surprise. Like, how a person for Beta Israel, a Jew person, doesn't keep Shabbat. So each group, same with Indian Jews, same with Yemenite Jews, Ashkenaz, Sephardic, all this kind of thing, this group, because each group thinks that it holds the well, that's what happened. We don't have the temple, and we don't have one way because of thousands of separation. What I'm trying to say is, it's not the same like in America. Prejudice is everywhere, especially when it comes to Black people. Okay, I can go somewhere to an event. They would think that I'm something else. They would never think that I'm, even though I will wear a suit and a pin of Israel and American flag, no one really thinks that I am a diplomat for Israel until I go to the stage and I start to speak. And so some people are like, she's a diplomat for the of Israel. So it's everywhere, also in Israel. And there are prejudiced people in Israel. We educate them. This is my generation, the younger generation, responsibility to educate them. So there are two ways that we're dealing with the challenges the young people are, the challenges that we're facing. One is the education, and the other one is by law. So the state of Israel, for the first time in the history, actually, created, recognized there is like some prejudiced people and racist people. So we have to fight this. So for the first time, the state of Israel created an independent authority that fights prejudice, racism, and discrimination based on color, gender, LGBTQ, on those kind of things. Okay, and a friend of mine is the head of that authority. Okay, so this is like a learning that the state of Israel is doing. The more the young people are, demanding and challenging and on this kind of things. So when we talk about Ethiopian young people integration, we're talking about education and integration from the foundation has to be the pride where you come from. So the education is us. We educate ourselves and our peers, and I'm educating my son where his mother came from, even though his father is Ashkenaz Jew from the Midwest. And also, when there are some racist comment or prejudice things happening, you have the right to sue the person. So there are two ways. So integration is happening. You see me as a diplomat of Israel. We have doctors, lawyers, public servants, activists, you name it. But we have a long way to go. It's up to us, we as the new generation, the young generation. But Israel is a place that is enabling. It's giving an opportunity. My education was mostly free. My university was free. Everything was paid for me. And still the state of Israel enabling education for youngest people to go to universities for free and to study and to gain higher education, which is an amazing itself.
Great. So would you say it was difficult for you to acclimate to the land and to the culture of Israel? And perhaps you could talk about how it was different for you. And I can't remember if you said your sister is a younger sister, but also maybe talk about how difficult it was for you to acclimate versus your parents versus any brothers or sisters.
Well, for me as the elder child, my job was to take care of the house and to take care of my siblings. So for example, since I learned the language faster and acclimate the culture, I was in charge of my siblings' education. I was the one who chose the schools because my parents, they don't speak Hebrew and they don't read and write. And my mother still, she doesn't read and write in Hebrew. That was my job. So I was kind of like, I love to study, and I directed my siblings in the right way. And that's basically, so for me, I was, kind of good students at school, that everything that I wanted was enabled and was open for me. I think it's for everyone in Israel. If you're doing good in the school, everything is open for you. So that's for everyone. And there are challenges. You address the challenges. And there are so many good people in Israel that they want to help and mentoring young people like me. So I went to a mentorship program empowering young leaders program. So I was part of it. So there's many good Israelis want to see many Ethiopians, to see them successful and sitting in a decision makers tables. So they're helping a lot. They're helping from their experience in a lot of leadership programs out there in Israel for the young Ethiopians, like me and the younger than me. And I was born in Ethiopia, but my sister was born in Israel, and she has the chutzpah more than me. So when you talk about generation, there are two kinds of generation. The one that was born in Ethiopia and the one that were born in Israel. The Israelis are Israelis for everything, in many ways. They have the chutzpah, they're pushing a lot, they're trying a lot, they study hard. It is really, I'm very, there are amazing, amazing young people from my community that you will see them leaders. You already see the first minister, Penina, she's my friend. We went to, and Gadi Yevarkan is the deputy minister. So we are already there in the decision makers table. We are there. So I'm very much optimistic. Yeah.
Here's another question. How would you describe the religious life of Ethiopian Jews?
What do you mean? How do you describe
the religious life? I mean, are Ethiopians tend to be more religious, more secular? Is there anything in particular to the religious life now that the Ethiopian community is in Israel?
Well, now in Israel, in Ethiopia, we're very religious, like very Orthodox according to the Torah, to the Bible. But in Israel, my parents and my grandparents' generation, they're still very Orthodox. They pray like in Ethiopia. I'll give you for my grandparents, when they came to Israel and they saw there are secular people and there are many things that are very different, and they don't have the Mergam Gojo once a month, the woman that goes to a different house for 7 days. They couldn't believe that it's not Israel. I mean, in Israel, that's what you do. Therefore, they never touch any meat in Israel until the day they died, because for them it wasn't kosher enough, because there are not certain things that are being done according to the Torah in a public space. That was my parents and my grandparents' generation. My generation and the younger generation, found their own path. Some of them became ultra-Orthodox, some of them are Chabadnik, some of them are, what you call Pasruga, national religions, and some of them are secular. It's very, very diverse.
Orthodox is keep Pasruga.
All,
we know that as modern Orthodox.
Modern Orthodox. Thank you, Rabbi. Yes, modern Orthodox. So it's very, very diverse. So now each has its own way, and some of the young people, and maybe I can show you now in the picture here. Some of the young people. I'll show you here. Some of the young people, they decided to continue our grandparents' tradition and to study the Kesim. This is a young people studying the Orit, like the Kesim used to do in Ethiopia. Okay, so there are many diverse people, and now because there is not that much of community like we used to live in Ethiopia, now everyone kind of live in a different cities. Every person chooses his own path. So I think it's hard to say one community now. It's very hard to say, since our generation is very different, and each person chooses his own path and what's fit for him and what he wants to do in his life and how he wants to celebrate his Judaism.
Thank you. So what would you say are the biggest challenges or issues facing the Ethiopian community in Israel today? And maybe how has that changed over the years?
Well, there are so many, challenges of poverty, and we don't come from, wealthy families or families with money, basically because our parents are immigrants and new, and whatever I make to myself, that's what I have. So it's not something that I can ask from my parents to help me with something. That one. The second one is right now we see some, that something that comes from the prejudice. We're dealing with the Israeli and the police and the young people. You saw that in the news. That's kind of things that we're dealing now. But I think in the future, many things will change, now already changing, because the young people are more aware of the right, and they are, demanding the right. They smart about many things. They know many things we know many things that our parents didn't know. We know the law, and with the authority that fights against racism and prejudice and discrimination, we know how to fight many things that are not right. So basically what I'm trying to say, that if you see demonstration of Ethiopians, it's because we're demanding for a better society. So we say we are part of the society, we are part of the Israeli society, and we'll demand that the society will be in the right path. So, yeah.
Thank you. Well, I am sensitive to the time. I'm not sure how long we go on. We've tried to answer as many questions as we can. Perhaps I can just make a couple comments. So first off, we just want to thank you, because that was a wonderful introduction and overview and perspective on your experience and maybe what it's like now in Israel for the Ethiopian community. We want to thank you for being with us and sharing your personal experience and your perspective, and also thank everyone who stayed and joined us. As David Hyman mentioned, this is the first of what we hope will be continued programming about Israel and topics of interest for the Kolami community. And as David mentioned, the next program in the series will focus on contemporary social justice issues in Israel, and we're making arrangements to have a representative of the New Israeli Fund to speak about the organization's social justice initiatives in Israel. And while we have not scheduled the exact date, we're looking to do that sometime in October after the high holidays. So Deputy Counsel, thank you so much for being with us. I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, any closing remarks, and then maybe...
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the time that you are spending with me here and listening to my story. One thing I'd say, as a diplomat for the State of Israel, we have an amazing country, an amazing house, and I'm so happy that we'll be able to go back to our ancestor home, to our birthright place. And this is something that everyone should be proud of, and I couldn't be happier to spend the Shabbat evening with you for an Al-Quds Park. This takes me way back. It was amazing. So thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, thank you. Rabbi, over to you for any other remarks.
Yes, well, we thought that it would be appropriate to close with Hatikva, which is the Israeli national anthem. So if you are someone who wants to rise for that, you may. And Rebecca's going to lead us, and let me just, I think I can get it on the screen. Just need to get the right page, 1 second.
כל עוד בלב אף פנימה, נפש יהודי הומייה, ולפת מזרח קדימה, עין לציון סופיה, עוד לא עבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בשנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.